And Commissioner Wisenhunt is not able to be with us today either, but she is with us online. So hello, Commissioner Wisenhunt. Apologize for being a minute or two late arriving. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our briefing for our August 25th regular meeting. We actually have no discussion items today. And I'm going to actually turn the meeting over to our Deputy County Manager, Damon Sanders Pratt. He's going to review the agenda items for the 25th. We'll have opportunities for some questions, and that'll be it. So you're on, Mr. Deputy County Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and Commissioners. So as you noted, today is the second briefing for the August 25th, 2022 meeting. So I'll jump right in. The first item, agenda item number 1, is a zoning petition of RS Parker Development from YR and AG and RS30 to YRS, RS15S, and RM5 for property located on the west side of Idols Road, south of Mallard Trail, commonly referred to as Riverwalk, which is adjacent to Tanglewood Park. The Village of Clemens at your last meeting noted that they were working on acquiring a traffic consultant, and so they have a meeting with DOT today, and then they noted that no later than the beginning of next week, they'd have some comments prepared, and they may want to address the board sometime. Chris Murphy is here to brief you on Riverwalk again, if you'd like him to. Otherwise, we'll go on to the next item.
Thank you. I do have one question. In fact, the reason I was talking to audience a little bit. I've spoken to Mr. Edgar Miller, who's in the audience, and that's why I was a minute or two late getting up here. And he's had a conversation with Mr. Murphy, particularly, he's from the Yadkin River Keepers. And I've exchanged a few emails with him, in particular, talked about the Yadkin River Conservation Plan and consistency of this subdivision with that. And I think you all have had some back and forth conversation, but I thought just for the record, you could kind of share, Chris, the information with us about those issues, about the concerns of the Yadkin River Plan, Conservation Plan area.
Certainly, Mr. Vice Chair, good afternoon, and Commissioners. YR zoning is a type of zoning that, again, it's not a conservation in and of itself. It does not preclude development. The YR district standards in the ordinance allow for development of the YR at a density of 1 unit for every 3 acres. The project that's before you is 317 plus or minus acres. Maybe larger than that. I'm going off the cuff here. 117 of that is in the YR, and their request is RS15S, RM5S, and YRS. The existing YR is remaining YR, and the 117 acres that are in the YR translates to, if you roughly do the math, about 45 units, I think, give or take. And the way the project works is they have the area that they're keeping YR, and you get density credit for that acreage, the area that they're proposing at RS15, and that respective acreage and how many units you can get there, and the area that they're proposing as RM5 and the number of units that you can get there. And then they're spreading those over the entire development. So from a pure acreage standpoint, they're not taking any more credit for YR than what the underlying density allows, 1 unit for every 3 acres. They are staying completely out of the floodplain. The edge of the floodplain, I looked this morning, is at elevation approximately 697, 698. The finished floor elevations of the finished grade of the proposed project is at between 730 and 740. So they're sitting a good 35 to 40 feet above the floodplain. They're not proposing any development within the floodplain. But whenever they do the project and do the density averaging, there are a few more units in the YR than what is allowed in the YR. But again, it's whenever you take the concept as a whole and look at the development, they're certainly complying with all of the floodplain regulations, the watershed regulations, and again, they have not ceded the density on the overall project. I'll be happy to answer any more specific questions, but that's kind of an overview of kind of the conversations that I have with Mr. Miller and actually Ryan Scott, I can't remember, gentleman who spoke a couple weeks ago. He actually called me today as well, and I believe he had spoken to the Yadkin Riverkeeper, and they had had some conversations, and he called me this morning and answered a couple clarifying questions for him as well.
That's good. I had most of that in my head. I mean, most of that in terms of what I thought, sort of the direction, and I knew surely you would be able to explain all that, which I think I get it, and I understand where it's on the edge. I think that an item that that is actually coming up again is the fact that there's a difference in our basically our water runoff management issues in the county versus the city in terms of the regulations. And I know we rely on state minimum regulations for anything out in the county, and we've had at least one other mention about the idea that maybe we should take a look at that. And in fact, I'd be real curious, and I'm sure you don't know this off the top of your head, but I'd be curious how many other, particularly the urban counties like Mecklenburg and Wake and Guilford and Durham, how many of them have expanded some of their city issues into of this more stringent water runoff regulations, et cetera, into the county and the water management issues. I'd just be curious if others have done that, or are they relying on the state as we do?
Anecdotally, I mean, I don't have a specific answer because I have not done the research. I do know that for Mecklenburg County, their development regulations, that they're regulated all under, it's my understanding, all under the same set of ordinances. Guilford County and Greensboro and High Point, that's not the case. You have Guilford County planning and you have Greensboro and High Point. Wake County is the same. You have Wake County government, and then you have all the, I want to say there are 8 or 9 municipalities in Wake County. And I can't say conclusively that they don't have the same set of rules, but I know they're not administered by the same group of folks.
Would that be too difficult to check in the next coming weeks, just to sort of see exactly where that is? Because
it would not probably be, it probably wouldn't be hard to check. If there were follow-up questions, I would probably need to have Keith Huff or someone from erosion control / stormwater city county to come and specifically address if there are specific questions, but I think we probably could find that out.
Yeah, I just think that would be helpful, and maybe, because we have talked about the fact that our county is, I mean, we're becoming more urbanized in the county. And we've had a number of, with the recent building boom, a number of subdivisions that have come before us. And I think it may be time, I don't know if it is time, but it may be time that we take a little, at least understand what additional and is there something in between what the state offers and what basically is kind of the city guidelines?
Well, the one thing I would offer, obviously that's going to be a political decision, and it would be discussions between the county and the city. Should you want the city to do to work with the county and have kind of a joint program? I think you could do that and still have separate rules. It would certainly be easier from a project review standpoint to have one entity that kind of reviewed everything within the county, so that there was a certain level of certainty of like how you submit the plans and those kind of things. It's a little disjointed whenever you've got some projects that come into our system and get sent to stormwater for the city, and then other projects come in and you have to kind of rely on this totally other project that's not even tied into any of our reviews. But obviously, as far as what the regulations are, who would enforce them, et cetera, I mean, that would obviously be a decision for the elected bodies. But I think that's certainly something that would be worth investigating. But I can reach out to Keith Huff or Matthew Osborne or someone in the stormwater and erosion control and find out if they know how it's handled in other large urban counties.
That'd be great. And in fact, maybe there's a way that we could kind of, whether we need an agenda item to discuss it, whether we need to have more, to find out what the, kind of from the city standpoint, at least to find out what the specifics of what we'd be dealing with as we looked at that, and to look at, I think that idea it's worth exploring, based on, because we've kind of, this is now the second time in probably 6 months that this issue has come up. So,
I jotted that down to share with the manager when
all right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions for Chris about this development?
All right. So you've already held your public hearing, so the vote would actually be next Thursday.
All right.
Ready at that time. Agenda item number 2 is approval of the minutes for your meeting of August 4th, 2022. Agenda item number 3 is adoption of the 2023 Housing Grant Projects Ordinance. Community and Economic Development Director Kyle Haney will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As the Deputy County Manager said, this is the adoption of the 2023 Housing Grant Projects Ordinance. This is the annual ordinance that we adopt that contains the grant funds we use for our single-family housing rehabilitation program, as well as our first-time homebuyer assistance program. This year contains our annual allocation as part of the home partnership, also North Carolina Housing Finance Agency funds from the emergency single-family loan pool, and program income that we receive that we redeploy with these efforts. Happy to answer any questions.
And Cal said 1.5 million ballpark figure.
Yes, sir. And well, you know, that's larger than most years, and that's because our program income accounts we open for 4 years. Sometimes we get money back and we redeploy that. And so it just gives us enough budget to spend what we receive in over those 4 years.
Any other questions for Kyle? Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman and Commissioners, if it's your board's pleasure, the next 6 items, 4 of them are Kyle Wolf. So if I could have him come up to do number 4, then 6, 7, and 9, I'll jump back up to 5 once he finishes doing this series of them, if that's okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The first item is an item for our Home and Community Care Block Grant, and so this is necessary to authorize submission of our county funding plan for FY23 for older adults to the state. This is something we do on an annual basis. PTRC is our lead area agency on aging, and they've met and they've coordinated the development of the county funding plan. And so the total amount of our funding in FY23 is $2,142,220. Compared to $1,903,347 last year. These funds will be allocated to DSS, the Shepherd Center of Winston-Salem, and the Shepherd Center of Kernersville, Senior Financial Care, which is really Financial Pathways, and Senior Services, and then a couple of transportation agencies, TransAid, WISTA, and the support systems of Forsyth County Transportation. Happy to answer any questions you might have on that one.
All right, with that, so agenda item number 6 is an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget to appropriate additional Winston-Salem Foundation grant funds to North Carolina Cooperative Extension in the amount of $2,461.
Right, and so almost a year ago, on September 16th, 2021, the board approved a resolution accepting additional funds from the Winston-Salem Foundation, which were for the expansion of community gardens in Forsyth County. And there was a residual balance left over at the end of FY22. We budgeted what we thought was going to be unspent, but there was actually a little bit more that was unspent. So this item will appropriate the remaining balance of $2,461 from a grant that that Community Cooperative Extension had received last year. Any questions?
Okay. Agenda item number 7 is a $10,915.14 amendment to the fiscal year 23 budget ordinance to appropriate fund balance to the Emergency Telephone System Fund for ineligible expenditures in fiscal year 2021, and then the accompanying amendment.
Right. And so the county has received correspondence from the North Carolina 911 Board indicating some ineligible expenditures were recorded in our Emergency Telephone System Fund in FY21. In the past, the county's corrected this type of error by adjusting current year expenditures, but the 911 Board has now directed the county to actually transfer funds from the general fund to correct the issue. And so this item is really amending the 23 budget ordinance to appropriate $10,915.19 from fund balance in order to transfer them to the Emergency Telephone System Fund. And then it's also amending that fund to accept the transfer. And I'm happy to try and answer any questions you might have on that item.
Can you be tell me just a little bit more about the what the ineligible expense was?
Yeah, so my understanding is it's really around in-house support for personal computers, and a lot of things around addressing and GIS and our CAD system. It used to be, several years ago, we were allowed to budget and record expenditures based on a percentage of an employee position, actual salary cost, a percentage of that person's costs. And then they've changed that, and they've just made it much more onerous to have specific examples of anytime there was like a change to an address or a change to the CAD system, like you really had to record it a lot more stringently. And so I think that there was just some back and forth going with the 911 board. And so it's really, it was around salary costs, for the county.
So it's money that if we had not done this, we would have paid for that anyway.
That's correct.
So, and we are able to take that $10,000 and it would go back into our 911
That's
account?
correct. Yes,
So
sir.
it's an aggravating paperwork side.
It's an accounting thing.
Dealing with the correction side and the time it took everybody, including
Yes, sir.
them and us, to get that solved.
That's correct, sir.
Got it.
There are no other questions. Agenda item number 9 is a $36,949 amendment to the fiscal year 23 budget ordinance to appropriate remaining Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Funds, the 2020 program.
And so back on September 10th of 2020, the board authorized acceptance of $96,022.50 for the 2020 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. And through the end of FY22, we've spent $59,074, leaving a balance of $36,949. And so this amendment is really just appropriating the unspent balance. I believe the funds will be used for the Real-Time Intelligence Center. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have there. So it's really just appropriating funds that we budgeted, but it's on a reimbursement basis, so we actually haven't received them yet, but we'll get them now.
Any questions?
I'm going to thank you, Kyle. I'm going to jump back up to item number 5, and that's an amendment to the fiscal year 23 budget ordinance to appropriate $10,000 from Behavioral Health Reserve Fund balance to support the Never Walk Alone event. And Denise Price, the Behavioral Health Services Director, will brief this item.
Hey, good afternoon. So as Damon said, I'm here to present to you an item to appropriate $10,000 from the Behavioral Health Reserve Fund to go toward the Never Walk Alone event. This is a second annual event. The first was pre-COVID, and everybody's truly excited to see this happening again. It is nicely aligned with the work that is being done in behavioral health services in that it focuses on hope, recovery, education, and resources. There's lots of community providers that are engaged in this event. Right, I looked this morning, it's about 25 additional providers that were going to be there. It is a joint event between the Sheriff's Office and Forsyth County. You happy to try to answer any questions?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I thought this was a sheriff's event, but to know that we're partnering in that,
We are.
good. Thank you.
So is the sheriff including part of his budget into this project?
I'm sorry, that one.
Is the sheriff is also sharing in the cost of this project?
I cannot answer that, but I can get the answer for you.
Okay, all right.
Previously, Denise, who paid for that? Was it out of the sheriff's department or was it out of our department?
So I was not involved in the first event. Chantel, are you familiar with that?
So it's my understanding, we provided a small allocation. He received, I think, sponsorships, and possibly the board may have appropriated some dollars to him the first year. I know last year they didn't have it. The year prior, I was not here either. So I cannot answer that question. I know this time around, they are, it's my understanding from the sheriff, they are not utilizing any funds from their budget because this event was not approved in their budget from the sheriff's office, which is why they asked if we had any dollars that can assist in behavioral health. And since this is part of our mission of opioid awareness, and we do have some dollars we can appropriate, it is something that we have the funds that we can support. So between these dollars and sponsorships, it is my understanding they are not utilizing any funds from their budget because they do not have any in their budget to do it.
Sure, that's fair. Do we know the total budget for the Never Walk Alone project?
I do not, but I can certainly try to get that
the
for you.
budget would be important to know, and then those stakeholders that's participating as well, to know what they're giving and doing is
The
also.
sheriff was planning to be here today to answer any questions. Ashley, can you tell if he's by chance joined remotely?
I think it's great, and we want to participate, but those are just questions.
Absolutely. If he can answer them right away, that'd be great. Okay, I'll get the answers for you.
Okay, thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 8 is a $21,000 amendment to the fiscal year 23 budget ordinance to appropriate supplemental links allocation funding to the Forsyth County Department of Social Services for its foster care program. I believe Sherita Kane is here from DSS to brief this item.
Good afternoon. The Forsyth County Department of Social Services received notification from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services on July 15, 2022, that we would be receiving supplemental funding in the amount of $21,100 to assist our young adults with a one-time clothing allowance to assist them with purchasing school clothing and uniforms. To be eligible for this specific one-time clothing allowance, each youth, there were 3 things or 3 requirements that they had to meet. So one is they had to be between the ages of 14 to 17. They had to be in foster care, and they had to be participating or have opened some link services. We've been approved to give up to $500 per youth for the one-time additional funds, and they must be expended by September 30th, 2022. Please let me know if you have any additional questions.
It's good.
So, yeah, I do just have a question or two. The students, where do these students come from, and how do they know how to apply?
So they do not have to apply. These youth were already in our custody, and so we have a list of each youth, and so we know which youth there are. There were 42 youth that met these requirements. The checks will be, once approved by you guys, the checks will be issued to the caregivers, and/or we have some youth that have aged out and they're still eligible, and so those checks will be directly mailed to them.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Just one question. First, I know the foster parents will be happy to also get some assistance. What is the Link Services? Just explain that to me, please.
Sure. So Link Services is a program that the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services started several years ago, and the purpose of it is to assist young adults with self-sufficiency. So our goal is to assist them with being able to, once they age out of foster care, to be able to get a job, to know how to fill out an application. We provide some resources, which can be financial resources, to assist them with tutoring. If clothing is needed, we have some youth that maybe they were able to get a job and they need clothes, they need uniforms, and so we can assist them with that. And so we get our funds from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and so they provide those funds to us to assist with the youth.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kane. Agenda item number 11 is a resolution awarding a contract for the purchase of 2 Ford Explorers, and Scott Angel, the General Services Director, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman and Board. This resolution awards a contract to Performance Ford Incorporated for the purchase of 2 2022 Ford Explorers for use by the Sheriff's Office. The Explorers will replace current vehicles utilized by the Sheriff's staff. The Ford Explorer is on state contract 70A, which was awarded to Performance Ford Incorporated located in Clinton, North Carolina. Contract 70A is the basis for the proposed contract, total amount not to exceed $56,832.98, which equates to a total unit cost for each Explorer of $28,416.49. So with that, there's representatives from the sheriff's office here as well as the fleet manager if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right. I apologize to the board. I skipped number 10, which is a resolution authorizing submission of an application to the Appalachian Regional Commission to apply for and accept, if awarded, a $50,000 Inspire Initiative grant to plan a recovery to work employer credential program. If I can ask Denise Price to read that again.
That was a lot of words, wasn't it? Hello again. So as Damon said, this is to seek your permission for an application to the Appalachian Regional Commission for a $10,000 grant that would pay for planning for a recovery to work employer credential program, and subsequently to accept it if awarded. We are incredibly hopeful that it's going to happen. As I was preparing this information for you today, I looked on the CDC's website, and there's some numbers that really demonstrate need for this. It says that 75% of people with a substance use disorder are employed. And what does that mean for our employers? About 9% of employees nationally either are actively fighting a alcohol or illicit drug addiction, and about 9% identifies being in recovery. So what does this do? It provides an infrastructure for employers to be a place that supports recovery and helps people to continue on that journey. This is an 18-month grant. It does require an in-kind contribution. The Piedmont Triad Regional Council will be partnering with us, and they have committed to $30,000, a little more. So we'll be contributing about a little under $20,000 with existing employee time that will be used to actually plan. We also anticipate having a little bit of dollars, about $550, that will go toward promotion, and that is already in our Frost budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions. All right, thank you.
Agenda item number 12 is amendments to the franchise ordinance agreement for residential and small business solid waste collection, transportation, and disposal services, and then adding optional recycling services in unincorporated areas of Forsyth County. And Minor Barnett will brief this item.
I don't see it.
We'll get there.
Thank you once again. I'm not seeing what I'm looking for. That one. Thank you again. Good afternoon. I'm here today to seek your consideration of an adjustment to the rate for franchise garbage collection service in the unincorporated areas of the county due to an increase in the tipping fee at the landfill that the franchise haulers have to pay when they take their loads to the landfill and they weigh in and weigh out and pay based on tonnage. This map is color-coded to show the service areas for the 3 current franchise holders that provide residential collection service in the unincorporated areas of the county. And the tipping fee that they pay has gone up effective July 1st from $32 a ton to $33 a ton. And with the total tons collected exceeding 16,000 tons a year for all of them combined, the $1 increase will have potentially a $16,000 increase in their operating cost. So historically, the county has routinely adjusted the rate for service anytime the tipping fee increases to protect them from any negative financial impacts for the service that they provide. So after doing the math, the recommended adjustment to the rate for basic service is an adjustment of 9 cents per month from $14.57 a month to $14.66. And that's a monthly rate for weekly collection service. Be glad to take any questions. Thank you. Right.
I have one, just a curiosity question. Is our contract with the haulers, does it actually have language that says, we will do this for you, that we will do this?
So there is language in the franchise ordinance agreement that says we can do this. And that's been in there since before I started administering the franchise system in 2005. This was already a well-established practice before I got involved in 2005.
I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. So the next two items are 13 and 14 are resolutions accepting bids and authorizing execution of timber deeds on county property at Horizons Park and Doral Drive, and General Services Deputy Director Kirby Robinson will brief this item, or these items, both of them.
Did I get that up right? Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman and Board. Appreciate you having me today. As background on this item, you'll recall that the board previously authorized a variety of woodland stewardship initiatives at 3 county properties. That's Rolling Hills, Horizons Park, and CG Hill Park. Those initiatives can include things like vegetation management to control invasive species, timber management, which is harvesting, and replanting services. At your October 2019 meeting, you authorized the sale of timber at Horizons Park and did the same for Rolling Hills at your February 1st, 2018 meeting. You'll recall that part of the Rolling Hills property was conveyed in January of 2020. The northeast portion of that property was not, because it was not accessible from Doral Drive at that time. Here are what the management plans for these two properties look like. Horizons, of course, is on the left. It's 87 acres. This is in the northeast corner of Horizons Park. You'll see Memorial Industrial School Road here, Horizons Residential Care here. The mountain biking trails are over here. They are not involved in the timber management plan. The areas shaded in red are clear-cut areas. The areas in green are thinning. And you'll see there are 2 access roads coming in off of the main roads, and highlighted in red there. At Rolling Hills, there's a 30-acre area, and it is the area shaded in blue. The other colors were bid out, and you'll see in a minute that the company did not choose to bid on those areas. So the area shaded in blue at Rolling Hills, again, here's the access off of Doral Drive, is clear-cut and mainly pine area. Just a quick recap, the goal of woodland stewardship really is to promote the health of the county's woodlands. We do that by addressing over-mature trees, overcrowding, damaged trees, and safety issues. Like if you look at Horizons Park, there's a variety of safety issues with trees that line the road there. So this would, of course, address that. It helps with invasive species. It also helps with future development costs, because you're going ahead and we really plan these management plans around, again, the health of the woodland, but also how does it support future development in county property. Additionally, revenue is not necessarily the goal of the project, but we do expect the initiatives to be self-sustaining. During timber harvesting, so when they're actually cutting, work is monitored by both the North Carolina Forest Service as well as our consulting forester. Our timber deed includes provisions for environmental standards on the property during cutting, condition standards for how the property should be left, as well as restrictions that really govern the time and method of harvesting. All of the plans that you've seen were shared with the local communities prior to releasing the bids. So we got their feedback on those and were reviewed by both Parks and Recreation staff as well as the North Carolina Forest Service. In terms of a bid process and evaluation against real property, so both bids were formally advertised by the purchasing department. They did that on the purchasing website, on the county's website, as well as the state's procurement website. Additionally, we sent notices directly to local timber companies. In both cases, we received one bid from Weyerhaeuser in our company. They're a local company, I believe out of Elkin. While they're national, but I think they're based here out of Elkin. While one bid was received for each of the properties from Weyerhaeuser, our consulting forester did verify that the tonnage prices, which are really based on the type of tree and the amount of that tree they would be harvesting, are reasonable in market value. Horizons Park is required to be completed within 2 years of deed execution. That's an industry standard, whereas Rolling Hills is required to be completed by October of 2023, and that's to allow for potential future development of that property. Here's just our 10,000-foot view of what the financials for the program look like. You've seen this sort of in previous memos that we've put out to the board. Expenditures at the top, you really have three categories of expenditures there. The timber appraisals we did at the very start of the program. Sale administration, which is really our boots on the ground of monitoring logging companies, but also planning the sale and bidding. And then vegetation control to weed out things like kudzu, tree of heaven, other invasive species. So our actuals there right now are a little over $83,000. I expect by the end of the sale process will be more like $95,000. In terms of revenue, the first sale at Rolling Hills, the bid amount was $145,000. Once that was actually weighed, it came in at $140,000, almost $141,000. The two deeds that are in front of you today, I have labeled as Rolling Hills 2. That's Doral Drive. That bid is $38,892, and then Horizons Park is $74,908. So again, while revenue is not necessarily the goal, you can see that the project is self-sustaining. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirby. Item number 15 is one appointment to the City County Planning Board. This is a city position on the board, so they're making a recommendation for that particular slot. Item number 16 is a resolution authorizing quantum Meruit payment to Turner Business Appraisers Incorporated for business personal property auditing and audit appeal defense services in fiscal year 2022 in the amount of $1,920. And John Burgess, our tax assessor collector, will brief this item.
Good afternoon. Your approval of this item would allow us to pay Turner Business Appraisers for work they completed that fell outside of their contract. Essentially how this happened is Turner is one of our three auditing firms. A lot of these audits are hard to do within the regular budgetary period of 1 year. On top of that, we recently conducted an RFP for these services, and going forward, we will only have one provider, and Turner will not be one of them. And so they were in the middle of some work on two appeals, two audits, and so I asked them to go ahead and complete their work to round out those audits.
Good. Any questions? Great.
Thank you, John Burgess. There. Item number 17 and 18 are resolutions approving refunds on vehicle taxation in the amounts of $16,242.07 and $12,926.59 respectively. All right. Item number 19 is an ordinance revising Chapter 10 of the Forsyth County Code entitled Fire Prevention and Protection, and County Fire Marshal Gary Stiers will brief this item.
Good afternoon. Let's see if I can pull this up correctly. You know, as soon as you get down here, I'm going to get it, right?
You got it.
I did. Right there. Thank you very much. All right, before you is a proposed combustible landscape ordinance, and definitely well aware that all landscape items are sort of combustible. So what we're trying to target here, what we've worked on, is that some landscape materials such as pine straw have a fast flame spread and have contributed to some dangerous exterior fires across our state. And in sort of looking through this problem, we worked with Winston-Salem Fire Department, the Kernsville Fire Department, and actually reached out to the Piedmont Triad Apartment Managers Association to sort of get their feel on some of our thoughts with this. And as we worked through this with them, we actually learned that they thought it was already a code everywhere in the state. So they actually were very supportive in some of our thoughts and actions. And really with this ordinance, their only request was to give about a year's time for the enforcement of it. So in a part of this request or proposal, you'll see that there's a year's space there before we would actually enforce. We are not the first to kind of do this. Apex, Cary, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham, and obviously Winston-Salem a couple of months ago went ahead and passed or revised their ordinance to include this. And basically, we all have the same goal. We would like to reduce and minimize the threat and intensity of fires in multifamily dwellings. And to the picture in the slide is what we're talking about, is removing those fast-moving landscape items up next to the building where there's vinyl or combustible construction. And I'll give you another slide to kind of show you why we would do that. The reason there's a danger of an exterior fire is sort of three things. One, there's a lack of fire protection on the exterior of any home, but more so on a multifamily dwelling, meaning that your smoke alarms, your sprinkler systems, all those items are inside, and that's how you get notified of a fire. So an exterior fire is very dangerous. Also, there's an accelerated speed with this type fire, and probably the most important factor is there's more, an increase in number of occupants in our multifamily dwellings, of course, because it's a multifamily occupancy type structure. This is the Raleigh fire back in 2007. That got, or really, it got a lot of folks' attention, but did get a lot of ordinances moving forward to get rid of pine needles in the fast-moving, spreading landscape. This was a basically beautiful summer day, except for what occurred, where the contributing factors was the landscape materials, wind, and unfortunately in the Pine Knoll subdivision here, they actually lost this entire community because of some of the factors that were at play. The reason we're picking at pine straw, and we're not trying to be unfair about it, is we are looking at the flame spread, the intensity of these fires. Pine straw, as you can see by this chart, spreads about 90 inches per minute. We're not banning everything. The large pine bark, the small pine bark, the other items are still in play. The other thing that we've worked with is some of the new projects that are coming in are building brick up 10 feet, so they don't have to worry about this ordinance at all. This ordinance only impacts 10 feet near the combustible items. So we are working with developers as they come through to sort of design around this as well. So some frequently asked questions that we thought of, we would include. This does not apply to a single family dwelling, your home, our home, two family dwellings. It applies to a multi-family dwelling. It does exclude the naturally falling pine straw that ends up there anyway. We would enforce that when we do our regular annual inspections. I tried to say both those words at one time. Our regular inspections, when we would enforce those. And on behalf of the Apartment Managers Association, we did take consideration of that it would not go in effect for 1 year, giving us some time to make sure we advertised, got the word out before we would start, trying to enforce. Sort of some interesting numbers, kind of the impacted buildings. Winston-Salem, about 1,800 buildings. Kernersville, that's 46 complexes. We couldn't pull out the number of buildings, but it's about 46 complexes. For us, about 27 complexes that we see, about roughly 234 or 230 buildings, which about 54% of those are located in Clemens. In the picture, sort of why I picked this one, this is in Clemens. This would not be impacted because you see the brick does go up more than the 10 feet. So there's a way to design around it as well. And most of the new buildings are designing this way. With that, I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Yeah, the only questions that I would have is relative to the enforcement piece, and I know that you said that you've given them some time to kind of work on in about a year to replace those items. One of the concerns, and I don't know if this is under your wheelhouse or not, is for those residents that live there, for what's the replacement, will that impact of the offset cost be to the residents that live there?
I wouldn't be able to tell you. I will be honest, there were several large management companies already in town. They were on this board. They've already switched over. Okay. And so I don't know I don't know the impacts. Obviously, each has its own different costs. Sort of our game plan was to catch it before they, do the winter landscape, before they do the summer landscape, so we'd have two cycles of it. But that would be, to be honest, to try to answer that question, it'd be up to the individual apartment units. But quite a few have already switched out, and I don't know that customers have ever really saw an impact.
So that apartment fire, that was in Charlotte or Raleigh, you said?
The one picture was in Raleigh, the Pine Knoll subdivision.
And do you know how much the cost was for them to switch out those pine needles?
I do not, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't. I can get it for you if because actually, I was hoping they'd be here today to kind of tell you that, but the Apartment Manager Association, they actually will try to attend next week.
Oh,
That
that's
may
good,
be
so that I
helpful.
could ask
Yeah.
them that question.
I
Okay,
definitely wanted them
fair
here
enough.
for us.
All right, thank you.
This is being focused primarily on the pine straw.
Yes, sir.
And the other mulch, ground stumps, and some other wood products, which it's combustible, but not like pine straw needles. But the pine straw is what you primarily focus on.
Yeah, we're targeting the fast moving, so like what you were alluding to, the mulch, the grinded up stuff that's in mulch would still be allowed. It's the pine needles or any material. There's other items out there that folks don't use anymore, but it's that flame spread rate that would be prohibited based on that.
I doubt if some were, you want to switch over and use the ground stumps and that kind of, it's ground up kind of in small chunks, but I doubt if it's much more cost than pine straw is.
It depends on the market. Sometimes pine straw is really high, and mulch is, Village of Clemens gives it away. Personally, that's what I kind of do, but I would yield to them to answer that question.
Yeah, one question. I serve on the Q board for the state, and we get a lot of different cases. None with pine straw, though, yet. But what's going to be the enforcement costs for those that violate this new regulation?
So it's an ordinance, so I'd have to yield to Gordon maybe, because it would be a violation of the ordinance, not necessarily the international or the state fire code, which we do have fees attached to that. Right. So it would be basically an ordinance, so I'd have to yield to Gordon on that one.
It would be subject to a civil penalty. But I do, when you're finished with your questions, I do have a question of Gary about this.
Okay.
Gary, when we spoke earlier, I guess I probably didn't understand this. The picture you showed had was that a combustible exterior above the brick?
Oh, the last picture?
Yes.
Yeah, in the balcony area there. Is that what you're talking about?
Just above the brick.
Just above the brick, yes, sir.
So that would be considered, that's like vinyl or something like that?
Yeah, this particular project is brick, and then that is a vinyl siding up above 10 feet. So that scenario would be allowed.
Okay, so I think we may need a sentence to say that combustible exterior above 10 feet is allowed.
I think that's in there.
Because what it says right now is it says within 10 feet of dwellings with combustible exterior construction. And this does have a combustible exterior. It's just above 10 feet. But we can work on that.
Some grammar. Okay.
Could I, Gordon, go back to the question relative to the enforcement? So the enforcement, although it's a civil penalty, is there a first warning, a second, and a third before there's an actual sanction? Or what does that look like?
So I guess it would depend on when this was noticed. If it was noticed during, well, never mind. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think in my own head here. What typically happens is folks would be warned, and Gary may be able to answer this much better than I can, but typically we're not looking to take people to court and collect money from them. So I would imagine that if Gary goes and finds pine straw like this around say the building's all vinyl and the pine straw goes right up to the building, he would let them know you can't do that. You need to replace it with, pine bark or one of the other slower burning mulches. But our practice as a county has never been to run to court, in situations like this. But certainly if somebody refused to comply, then we would have to assess.
And you're going to be writing this up, so I'm assuming that this will come in a form of policy.
No, we don't have a set written policy about this, but I'll defer to Gary. How have you been
Yeah, and
enforcing these?
so, as Commissioner Elmean kind of alluded to, and we have other codes that we enforce, and typically, unless it's a locked and blocked exit, is about the only thing if we see immediately, and there's been history of that, that's sort of an immediate one. To be very honest, we probably do maybe 15, 20 citations a year over about 4,000 inspections, so it's very minor. But what our folks and what sort of our policies are, one, we're going to try to work with the person first. The goal is not, like Gordon was saying, taking everybody to court. That is not the goal. The goal is fire prevention. So unfortunately, we do have to get into that situation. But typically, outside the exiting scenario, it's typically been given multiple times to correct, and there's just been no action. So we really didn't have any choice but to pursue further.
I'm just thinking that a possible policy to have a procedure in line or somewhere.
Yeah, we
so
do.
that we don't have to revisit it again if
Right,
something
and we
was
do
to
have a corrective actions policy that we take with everyone. Because our process when we go in to do a code enforcement,
Sure.
we understand that typically we're asking folks to spend more money. And to be very honest, during COVID, we sort of overly worked with folks because the economy was so harsh on businesses, especially restaurants and things of the such. So we really go out of our way, and our staff goes out of our way to work with folks to ensure that there's compliance, because that's the ultimate goal.
Certainly.
But obviously, there will be cases where we have situations that, because my fear with this one is an apartment complex that may be smaller, not getting the information.
Right.
That's where we, when we do our inspections process, is educate them about that and give them time, because we do understand that if they just put down several $1,000s worth of needles, that's sort of unfair. If they're going to work with us, we can work through those situations. So we actually do internally have a policy, because we do have to deal with that quite regularly.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one small splitting hair question.
Okay.
You mentioned that basically pine straw that naturally fell from the trees would be exempt, basically. And obviously, if you're that close to the actual, if you're within 10 feet of the trees and you've got a whole bunch of trees, I can just easily see people raking up some of their own straw and just putting it right around their shrubs, which in fact is fallen straw. Like I said, it's a little splitting hair issue.
Yeah, it is sometimes.
I suspect that's a minor one, but I could see the first thing, well, I didn't buy these somewhere. I raked them right here. They're exempt.
Yeah, and we work through that, and you got to keep in mind too that a lot of these are large. To be honest, what helps us a lot is the lease agreements between the tenant and the actual owner. A lot of these things are prohibited anyway. They do give them natural landscape areas if they want to put some plants or grow a garden. So typically, they what I'm seeing now is a lot of folks compensate for that already. So that would be the splitting hairs one, I guess you said, but that was actually frequently asked questions I saw out of the Raleigh comments.
Too many large multifamily dwelling houses do that, so that's probably not an issue. But
probably not.
It did jump into my head that it was exempting the the pine straw. Got it.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions for Gary? Thank you.
And we'll revise those comments on some of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. So item number 20 is a report transmitting notice of residual petroleum at the airport. Items 21 and 22 and 23 are added items. 21 and 22, Scott Angel, the General Services Director, will brief for you. The number 21 is a resolution awarding a contract for the purchase of 17 Dodge Charger police pursuit vehicles.
Good afternoon again. As Damon said, this resolution, well, let me back up first and give you a little bit of history. So if you'll recall, the board ratified and awarded a contract to Horace G. Ilderton, LLC, doing business as Ilderton Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, for the purchase of 17 Dodge Charger police pursuit vehicles at the January 6th meeting of this year. The fleet manager was later notified on March 1st by Ilderton that all their orders for 2022 Chargers were canceled by Dodge on February 25th, and they did not have any of these vehicles available for purchase. The fleet manager was again contacted just a few days ago by Elderton to make him aware that the 17 Dodge Chargers that the county had ordered and was told were canceled had in fact been produced by Dodge and were available to the county to purchase if interested. Elderton communicated that they actually have 11 of the Chargers in their possession on the lot, which has been verified by our fleet manager. And the remaining 6 Chargers are in the process of being delivered to Elderton. Of course, the sheriff's office is interested in obtaining these 17 Chargers, and the fleet manager supports that interest. So the resolution awards a contract to Horace G. Elderton, LLC, for the purchase of 17 Dodge Charger police pursuit vehicles for use by the sheriff's office. And these are the V6 all-wheel drive units. And the Chargers will replace current units in the sheriff's fleet. The North Carolina Sheriff's Association bid for the Chargers received from Elderton is the basis for the proposed contract total amount not to exceed $535,279, which equates to a unit cost per Charger of $31,487. So we'll say, while we're glad to get this opportunity to purchase these Chargers, we are still hearing and reading that Dodge is likely to discontinue production of the Charger and altogether, or as we know it today, possibly re-engineer it as an electric vehicle. So we still believe we're going to have to seek other pursuit vehicle options, such as the Ford Interceptor going forward. We really just have limited options for pursuit vehicles. So take any questions if anybody has anything.
Was there any price increase between the January price?
There was. So the Sheriff's Association contract's been updated for this fiscal year, and the pricing for the 2022s is now basically the 23 model price minus a $4,000 model year discount for 2022 models. So there is a little bit of a difference about from what we brought to you back in January.
I'm trying to think through the issue in January. It looks like there was sort of an acceptance of a purchase. And so are you saying it's a discounted, or we're paying, there's an extra and the discount is for 22 vehicles? I want to make sure I understand. The net price is an increase.
Yeah, about 8% over what it was in January.
8%?
Yes, sir.
I'm just trying to. So are any of those going to be 2023 vehicles?
No, they're all 2022 models.
They're all 2022, so why are we paying any more since they accepted our offer? They're the ones that refused to deliver. I guess they re-extended it with a price increase. Is that what you're telling me? And you're bringing this to accept it with a price increase?
Essentially, yes.
Although, the item that Scott briefed earlier about the 2 Explorers, it actually had Interceptors instead of the Chargers, and we took that off. So it was just those Explorers. And then these Chargers are replacing those Interceptors, and so that's a savings of about $50,000 going from the Interceptors to the Chargers.
That's correct.
Okay. I think I got it.
Okay. If there are no other questions on that item, agenda item number 22.
Let me ask one more question.
Yes, sir.
So when these cars come here, what other modifications happens to them that are not part of the bid process? I've noticed back seats come out is one thing.
Yeah, and probably I'll defer to our fleet manager to speak to more details about that. But there are several things that are added to that, but I'll let him speak to that. And we do actually have the equipment that has to be added to that in stock. So that's not an additional purchase we'll have to make.
And that's under a separate purchase order, those items apparently.
Right, yeah, it's not included.
Okay.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, all the upfit parts we require for those 2 cars are here in our facility. Because we had ordered them, the last manager ordered basically all the parts for the 20 Chargers, but we still got all those in stock in lieu of getting rid of them on the gov deals or anything. What was your question again about?
What modifications are required to the cars when they are delivered to us? We do something to them to make, besides paint them, I guess. There's something else we do.
Once we get them in our inventory, get them in the shop, we put in partitions, light bars, brush guards. We have plastic seats for them to help out with the prisoner transport. It makes it a lot easier to clean, and plus the seat belts are relocated. And then usually a siren and consoles and laptop mounts. We don't supply the laptops, that's sheriff's office, but it's we pretty much do everything in-house once we get them on our lot. But Dodge,
Is there a cost, do we have a cost associated with that? A number?
yeah, it's part of the CPO budget. When we do the budget, we allow all the parts, we add all the parts that are required for that specific car, whether it's a slick top, which is no light bar, or a light bar car. So all those are figured in as the budget goes through.
I don't know that we have a total cost of all that work to give you, but we could try to run down some.
So it's the radios, the laptop holders, the back seat,
Yeah,
I guess
And the light bars.
light bars, cages.
and then the fence between the driver and
Yeah.
the back. the
Yeah, all
guard.
that's, yeah.
Also, a lot of cabling, wiring associated with the electronics that go in there, that's all done in-house as well.
And how long does that usually take? A week or two?
To do one car, I think about 3 days, depending on what's required, what we need to put in their car. Some cars takes less, depending on what the sheriff's office wants us to do as far as putting all the equipment together.
And are they painted or are they wrapped?
The cars are painted black. We take them to the local, whoever won the, JKS won the bid, so we take them to them, they put all the decals on it. Sheriff's Department, anything and all that stuff on the front and the back of the car. So that's an extra cost, but it's,
So the number we get for the car from Illerton, it's a base number. We still do modifications to them
yes,
still.
yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
It'd be kind of nice to know what the total car package costs. And obviously, we're providing 3 days worth of labor per car, sounds to me like.
Yeah.
That we're doing 3 days worth of labor on the car. I'd be kind of curious to see what the turnkey cost of that is. And what choices do we have that can make those purchases more efficient in terms of the total cost? I mean, are there other bells and whistles that what you buy during that fix-up, could it be cheaper?
Yes. I'm actually working on that right now, trying to get a cost together per car.
And as Scott noted, we reclaim some of these things off of cars that have been maybe wrecked. So we're using those. Then we have some in stock for the Chargers. For the Interceptors, we'd have to buy them. So this is another savings in that regard right now, because we're using reclaimed and parts we already have, versus if we would have got the Interceptors, we don't have the size to fit those vehicles.
Because initially, if we decide to go with the Interceptors or SUV, there's a started cost once we get them, everything upfitted. As they get run down or deadline per se, we take all that equipment off, it'll fit in another car. So we don't really hope, if we just stay with Charger for a whole length of time, we would have a lot more parts and stuff to take off of deadline cars that we could actually reuse. So we try to do that as much as we can. But when you switch body styles, there's an upfront general cost. It's higher.
So I guess we got a few minutes. What happens to who purchases the back seats when they're taken out and replaced?
We try to put them in if we take out a back seat, plastic seat, we try to keep the original seats so we can just throw them in there and then it goes with the car.
So when you resell the car, you put the original seats back in?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So somewhere we have a whole bunch of back seats stored?
Fairchild Drive.
Well, we got them in it's actually in the Lowe's building facility, but we have an area there where we're storing all the parts that we buy and we're not using right now. But once these Chargers come in, we'll be taking most of that out of there and using it.
Okay, that's a lot of information. Any other questions?
All right. Agenda item number 22 is also, Scott, is a resolution approving the use of 6 deadline county vehicles by the Sheriff's Office for pursuit intervention technique training.
Okay, so the Sheriff's Office is planning to conduct pursuit intervention technique or pit maneuver training for deputies. The Sheriff's Office approached the fleet manager and requested the use of 3 deadline patrol vehicles and 3 deadline fleet vehicles for the training. And just as a reminder, deadline vehicles are those that are not suitable for continued county use because of accident damage, need for significant mechanical repairs, high mileage, or obsolescence. So the deadline vehicles were requested because the vehicles will receive damage during the training. The fleet manager has identified and recommended 6 deadline vehicles for use in the training, which consist of 3 Dodge Chargers, which are the patrol vehicles, 1 Buick LaCrosse, and 2 Ford Crown Victorias. And these specific vehicles were deadline because of accident damage, mechanical issues, and high mileage. The Sheriff's Office agrees that the 6 identified deadline vehicles are good candidates for use in the pit maneuver training. So this resolution approves the use of the previously mentioned 6 deadline county vehicles by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office for pursuit intervention technique training. And upon completion of the training, the vehicles will be returned to the fleet manager and eventually declared as surplus for disposal in the future along with other vehicles. So, any questions?
So the training, is that something that's done here locally?
I believe so. As far as specifics on that, I'll defer to the Sheriff's Office.
Good afternoon.
Greetings.
That training is actually going to be held here locally, if not in Forsyth County. We're looking for an appropriate venue now in one of the surrounding counties, hopefully at one of the local technical colleges.
So I'm assuming that the training is in-house with the Sheriff's Department. We're not bringing somebody.
Correct. There will be. We have 5 instructors that have been certified through the state.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 23 is a resolution supporting Operation Greenlight for veterans in Forsyth County, North Carolina. This was an item that was mentioned by Commissioner Wisenhunt at our last meeting. It would take place from November 7th through November 13th. The resolution authorizes the lighting of certain county buildings green during that time to honor veterans.
Any questions?
I do. So we're supposed to have some conversations with the city of Winston-Salem in regards to the cooperation with this. Any feedback yet?
I don't have any feedback yet. I will talk to the county manager. I was out a couple of days, but I'm sure he did that, but I will confirm that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So if there are no other questions, that's the agenda for the meeting of the 25th. And if there are no other matters that commissioners wish to discuss, I have a closed session motion for the board to consider. All right. I need to ask the board to consider a motion to go into closed session to discuss a matter to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged pursuant to the provisions of North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A3. And since there's no other business to come before the board at this meeting, following the closed session, the meeting will be adjourned.
You have a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries.